stretching more than a mile across the Yangtze River in the heart of China, rising as tall as a skyscraper and holding back a reservoir that reaches for hundreds of miles upstream. The Three Gorges Dam is one of the largest and most ambitious structures ever built by human hands. It is a monument to engineering on a scale that staggers the imagination. A wall of concrete and steel, designed to tame one of the mightiest and most dangerous rivers on Earth. And downstream of that great wall, spread across the vast and fertile plains of the lower Yangtze, live hundreds of millions of people, by many reckonings around 400 million souls, whose homes, cities, farms, and lives lie in the path of the river the dam holds back. This staggering concentration of humanity, living below one of the world's largest dams, is what gives the Three Gorges Dam its extraordinary significance and its shadow of risk. This is the story of that dam, of why it was built, of the immense benefits it provides, of the genuine engineering challenges and controversies that surround it, and of the reason its fate is bound up with the lives of so many millions of people that it has become one of the most consequential structures on the planet. Before going further, it is important to be clear and measured, because this is a subject that attracts a great deal of sensational speculation, and responsible discussion requires separating the real from the exaggerated. The Three Gorges Dam is not on the verge of collapse. Sensational claims that periodically circulate that the dam is buckling, deforming, or about to fail catastrophically have been repeatedly examined and denied by the authorities and engineers responsible for it. And many of the most dramatic viral claims, such as those based on distorted satellite images, have been thoroughly debunked. The dam is intensively monitored, and there is no credible evidence that it is about to fail. The purpose of exploring the risks associated with a structure of this magnitude is not to predict imminent disaster, but to understand honestly why a dam holding back so much water above so many people is so significant, what genuine challenges it faces, and why the stakes surrounding it are so extraordinarily high. With that essential context established, we can explore the remarkable story of the Three Gorges Dam and the 400 million lives whose fate is, in ways large and small, connected to it. The river that had to be tamed to understand why China built the Three Gorges Dam, you first have to understand the Yangtze River, because the dam cannot be comprehended apart from the river it was built to control. The Yangtze is the longest river in Asia and one of the longest in the world, flowing thousands of miles from the highlands of the Tibetan Plateau across the breadth of China to the sea near Shanghai. Along its course, it drains an enormous basin that is home to a vast portion of China's population and much of its most productive farmland and industry. The Yangtze is not merely a river, it is the central artery of a civilization, the lifeblood of a region that has been one of the most densely populated and economically vital places on Earth for thousands of years. But the Yangtze has always been a river of two faces. For all the life it gives, it has also been a river of death, prone to catastrophic flooding that has, over the centuries, killed staggering numbers of people. When the great rains come and the river swells beyond its banks, it can inundate the vast lowlands of its lower course, drowning cities and farmland, destroying homes, and taking lives on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. The history of the Yangtze is punctuated by floods of almost unimaginable devastation, disasters that killed hundreds of thousands, and in the worst cases even millions, of people, ranking among the deadliest natural catastrophes in all of human history. For the civilization built along its banks, the flooding of the Yangtze was a recurring nightmare, an ancient and terrible threat that no dynasty or government had ever been able to master. The dream of controlling the Yangtze, of taming its deadly floods and harnessing its immense power, was a dream that stretched back generations, an aspiration held by leaders and engineers who imagined that one day human ingenuity might finally conquer the great river's fury. The Three Gorges Dam was the ultimate expression of that dream, the largest and most ambitious attempt ever made to master the Yangtze, to stand a wall of concrete against its floods, and to turn its destructive power to human benefit. Building the impossible the construction of the Three Gorges Dam was one of the greatest engineering undertakings in human history, a project of such scale and ambition that it pushed the limits of what was thought possible. Conceived over many decades and finally built over a span of years, the dam required the mobilization of enormous resources, the labor of vast numbers of workers, and the pouring of quantities of concrete so immense as to be almost beyond comprehension. When it was completed, the Three Gorges Dam stood as one of the largest concrete structures ever built. A barrier stretching more than a mile across the Yangtze and rising to a great height, holding back a reservoir that extended for hundreds of miles upstream, transforming a long stretch of the wild river into a deep and placid lake. The scale of the project was matched only by the scale of its ambition, for the dam was designed to serve several enormous purposes at once. It was, first and foremost, a flood control structure intended to hold back the deadly floodwaters of the Yangtze and protect the vast populations downstream from the catastrophic inundations that had plagued them for millennia. It was also a hydroelectric power station of unprecedented capacity, its great turbines designed to generate an enormous amount of electricity, making it one of the largest power stations of any kind in the world and a major source of energy for a rapidly developing nation hungry for power. And it was designed to improve navigation on the river, raising the water level to allow larger ships to travel further upstream, opening the interior of the country to shipping and trade. The dam was, in short, intended to be a triumph on every front, a shield against floods, a generator of clean power, and an artery of commerce, all in one colossal structure. Its completion was celebrated as a landmark achievement, a demonstration of what a determined nation could accomplish, and a fulfillment of the ancient dream of taming the great river. To its builders and supporters, the Three Gorges Dam was a wonder of the modern world, a monument to human capability and national ambition on a scale rarely seen. The benefits the dam provides before turning to the risks and controversies, it is only fair to acknowledge fully the genuine and enormous benefits that the Three Gorges Dam provides, because these benefits are real, substantial, and central to any honest understanding of the structure. The dam is not merely a source of risk, it is also a source of tremendous value, and it delivers on much of the promise that motivated its construction. To weigh its significance honestly, one must give full weight to what it accomplishes. The most important benefit, and the primary justification for the dam, is flood control. By holding back the floodwaters of the Yangtze during the dangerous flood season, the dam can reduce the peak of a flood as it passes downstream, lowering the crest of the water and lessening the inundation of the vulnerable lowlands. In this way, the dam is intended to protect the hundreds of millions of people who live downstream from the catastrophic floods that once killed so many, providing a measure of security against a threat that had haunted the region for all of its history. When the great floods come, as they still do, the dam's reservoir can absorb a portion of the surge, holding back water that would otherwise pour downstream, and this capacity has, on a number of occasions, been credited with helping to reduce the severity of flooding and protect downstream communities. This flood control function is the dam's most vital purpose and its greatest justification, the shield it holds against the river's deadly floods. Beyond flood control, the dam is a colossal generator of electricity, its turbines producing a vast quantity of clean hydroelectric power that helps to light the cities and power the industries of a huge nation. This power, generated without the burning of fossil fuels, displaces an enormous amount of coal that would otherwise be burned, reducing air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, and providing a major source of the energy that has fueled the country's remarkable economic growth. The scale of the power generation is immense, making the dam one of the single largest sources of electricity in the world, a genuine and significant contribution to the nation's energy supply. And the dam has improved navigation on the Yangtze, deepening the water and enabling larger vessels to travel further into the interior of the country, boosting trade and commerce and knitting the interior more closely to the coast. These benefits, flood protection, clean power, improved navigation, are real and substantial, and they represent the fulfillment of much of the dam's ambitious promise. Any fair accounting of the Three Gorges Dam must recognize that it is a structure of enormous utility, providing genuine and valuable services to a vast population, and that it stands as a real achievement even as it carries real risks and costs. The human cost of the reservoir, but the Three Gorges Dam, came at a profound human cost, one that must be reckoned with as part of its full story, because the creation of its enormous reservoir required the displacement of an extraordinary number of people from their homes. When the dam was built and the reservoir began to fill, the rising waters submerged a vast area of land upstream, cities, towns, villages, farms, and countless homes that had stood along the river for generations, in some cases for many centuries. To make way for the reservoir, well over 1 million people had to be relocated, uprooted from the places where their families had lived for generations and resettled elsewhere, in one of the largest forced displacements ever undertaken for a construction project. The scale of this displacement was staggering, and its human consequences were profound. More than 1 million people, by many accounts well over 1 million, in a resettlement that stretched across the entire period of the dam's construction and beyond, lost their homes, their communities, and often their livelihoods to the rising waters. Ancient towns and cultural sites that had existed for hundreds or thousands of years were submerged forever beneath the reservoir, drowning a portion of the region's history and heritage under the deep water. The people who were relocated faced enormous challenges in rebuilding their lives, and many struggled to adapt to new homes and new circumstances. Sometimes far from the river that had sustained their families for generations, the displacement disrupted communities, severed people from their roots, and imposed hardships that were, for many, deep and lasting. This human cost is an essential part of the story of the Three Gorges Dam, a reminder that even a structure of great benefit can carry a heavy price, and that the taming of the great river came at the expense of the more than 1 million people who were forced to give up their homes so that the reservoir could rise. Their sacrifice is woven into the very existence of the dam, and it stands as one of the most significant and sobering aspects of the entire project. The weight of the water now, we come to the heart of the matter. To the reason the Three Gorges Dam carries such an extraordinary shadow of risk despite its benefits, and it lies in the simple, staggering physics of what the dam holds back and who lives below it. The reservoir behind the Three Gorges Dam contains an almost unimaginable quantity of water, a volume so vast that it is measured in tens of billions of tons. Held back by the Great Wall of the dam and perched above the lowlands downstream, this is the fundamental fact from which all the risk flows, an enormous mass of water held high above a densely populated plain by a single structure, however mighty that structure may be. The concentration of people below the dam is what transforms this physics into a matter of such grave consequence. The lower Yangtze basin, downstream of the dam, is one of the most densely populated regions on the entire planet, home to a vast portion of China's population, by many estimates on the order of 400 million people living in the broad expanse of the river basin below the dam. Great cities line the river's lower course, enormous metropolises of many millions each, along with countless towns and an immense rural population working the fertile floodplains. This is agricultural heartland and industrial powerhouse alike, one of the beating hearts of the world's most populous nation, and all of it lies downstream of the Great Dam and the immense reservoir it holds back. The sheer number of people concentrated in the path of the river below the dam is what gives the structure its extraordinary significance, because it means that anything affecting the dam, any failure, however unlikely, would have consequences on a scale almost without precedent. It is this combination of an enormous mass of held-back water above an enormous concentration of people that places the Three Gorges Dam in a category of its own when it comes to the stakes involved. The dam is not dangerous because it is likely to fail. It is significant because of the magnitude of what would be at stake if it ever did, and because of the number of lives whose safety depends, in part, on its continued integrity. The unthinkable scenario is necessary in exploring the significance of the Three Gorges Dam to consider the unthinkable scenario, the catastrophic failure of the dam, not because it is likely, but because it is the source of the extraordinary stakes that surround the structure, and understanding it honestly requires facing it directly while keeping its improbability firmly in mind. If the Three Gorges Dam were to fail catastrophically, releasing the enormous reservoir behind it in a sudden and uncontrolled rush, the consequences would be almost beyond comprehension. A wall of water of unimaginable volume and force would surge down the Yangtze Valley, and the devastation to the densely populated regions downstream would be catastrophic on a scale that is difficult to put into words. Such a scenario, however remote, is what lends the dam its shadow of risk. A sudden release of the reservoir would send a flood far exceeding anything the natural river could produce. A torrent that would race downstream, overwhelming everything in its path, striking the cities and farmlands and populations of the lower Yangtze with a force against which little could stand. The loss of life in such an event could be staggering, and the disruption to one of the most economically vital regions of the world would be immense, with consequences rippling far beyond China itself. It is this nightmare scenario, this vision of catastrophe, that fuels much of the anxious speculation about the dam, and it is why the structure is so often discussed in terms of the vast number of lives that would be at risk in the event of its failure. But it is essential to hold this scenario in its proper perspective. It is not a prediction, it is a worst case, an extreme possibility whose consequences are catastrophic precisely because they are so vast, but whose likelihood is, by all credible assessment, very low. The dam was built to exacting standards, is intensively monitored, and is not showing signs of imminent failure. The unthinkable scenario is worth understanding not because it is coming, but because its very magnitude is what makes the dam so significant and its integrity so important. To understand the Three Gorges Dam is to hold two truths at once: that a catastrophic failure would be almost unimaginably devastating, and that such a failure is, by every credible measure, highly unlikely. The debunked rumors and the real questions, because the stakes surrounding the Three Gorges Dam are so high, it has become the subject of persistent rumors and sensational claims, and separating these from the genuine engineering questions is essential to an honest understanding, because the two are very different things. Over the years, dramatic assertions have circulated widely, particularly online, claiming that the dam is deforming, buckling, on the verge of collapse, or somehow fundamentally compromised. Some of the most viral of these claims were based on satellite images that appeared to show the dam bending or distorting, images that spread rapidly and provoked alarm around the world. These particular claims, however, have been thoroughly examined and largely debunked. The satellite images that appeared to show a deforming dam were found to be distorted by the processing methods used, artifacts of the way certain satellite imagery is generated, rather than evidence of any actual deformation of the structure. An analysis of more reliable imagery showed the dam standing straight and sound. The authorities and engineers responsible for the dam have repeatedly and firmly denied that it is deforming or in any danger of collapse. An independent examination has generally supported the conclusion that the sensational claims of imminent failure are without foundation. This does not mean that the dam is beyond all criticism or free of all challenges, but it does mean that the most dramatic and viral claims that the structure is visibly buckling or about to give way are not supported by credible evidence and have been convincingly refuted. It is important to distinguish these debunked rumors from the genuine and serious engineering questions that surround any structure of this magnitude, because conflating the two does a disservice to honest understanding. The real questions about the Three Gorges Dam are not whether it is about to collapse tomorrow. By all credible assessment, it is not, but rather the subtler. Long-term challenges that a structure of this scale inevitably faces, challenges that are real and worthy of serious attention even as the sensational rumors are set aside. To those genuine challenges we now turn, for they are the substance of the legitimate concerns about the dam, distinct from the noise of the debunked claims. The problem of the sediment. Among the most genuine and significant long-term challenges facing the Three Gorges Dam is the problem of sediment, a slow and persistent issue that is inherent to the damming of a great river, and that poses real questions about the dam's long-term functioning. Every river carries sediment, sand, silt, and mud eroded from the land and carried along in the flowing water, and the Yangtze, draining a vast and often mountainous basin, carries an enormous load of it. Under natural conditions, this sediment flows down the river and is deposited along its course and at its mouth, building the fertile floodplains and deltas that have sustained civilization for millennia. But when a great dam is built across the river, the flow slows in the reservoir behind it. and the sediment the water was carrying settles out and accumulates on the bottom of the reservoir, trapped behind the dam. This accumulation of sediment poses several serious long-term problems. As sediment builds up in the reservoir, it gradually reduces the reservoir's capacity to hold water, which over a long enough time could diminish the dam's ability to perform its functions, including flood control and power generation, as the space available to store water slowly fills with silt. The management of this sediment is a significant ongoing engineering challenge, requiring careful operation of the dam to flush sediment through and prevent excessive accumulation, a delicate balance that must be maintained over the long life of the structure. Beyond the reservoir itself, the trapping of sediment has consequences downstream, because the water released from the dam, having deposited its sediment load in the reservoir, flows on with less sediment than it naturally would. This sediment-starved water can erode the riverbed and banks downstream, and the reduced flow of sediment to the lower river and its delta can affect the fertile floodplains and the coastal regions that depend on the deposition of sediment to maintain themselves, potentially contributing to erosion of the delta and other long-term changes to the river's lower course and the sea's edge. The sediment problem is thus a genuine and complex challenge, one that operates on a long time scale, but that poses real questions about the dam's long-term performance and its effects on the river system as a whole. It is exactly the kind of legitimate engineering concern that deserves serious attention, distinct from the sensational rumors, and it illustrates the subtle, enduring challenges that a structure of this magnitude must contend with over the decades and centuries of its existence. The question of earthquakes, another genuine area of concern surrounding the Three Gorges Dam, involves earthquakes, both the possibility that the dam and its reservoir might influence seismic activity in the region, and the question of how the dam would withstand a major earthquake, and this is a subject that deserves careful and measured consideration. The phenomenon by which large reservoirs can influence seismic activity is a real and documented one, known as reservoir-induced seismicity. The immense weight of the water in a large reservoir, and the way that water can seep into the rock beneath and around it, changing the pressures within the earth, can in some circumstances influence the behavior of geological faults, potentially triggering earthquakes that might not otherwise have occurred, or altering the timing of ones that would have. This is a recognized phenomenon associated with large dams around the world, and the Three Gorges Dam, with its enormous reservoir, sits in a region that is not free of seismic activity. The concern, therefore, is twofold. There is the question of whether the great reservoir might itself contribute to increased seismic activity in the surrounding region, a possibility that has been the subject of study and monitoring, and there have been observations of increased minor seismic activity in the area since the reservoir filled. Consistent with the phenomenon of reservoir-induced seismicity, though the significance and the risks of this remain matters of careful assessment. And there is the question of how the dam itself would withstand a major earthquake, should one occur, given that the region has geological faults and is capable of producing significant earthquakes. The dam was designed and built to withstand seismic forces, engineered to a standard intended to allow it to survive a substantial earthquake, and its designers took the seismic risks of the region into account. Nonetheless, the interaction between a structure of this magnitude, an enormous reservoir, and a seismically active region is a genuine subject of concern and ongoing study. One of the real and serious questions that surround the dam, distinct from the sensational rumors. The question of earthquakes illustrates again the kind of legitimate, complex, long-term challenge that a structure of this scale faces. A challenge that is taken seriously by those responsible for the dam and that deserves careful, measured attention rather than either dismissal or panic. The landslides along the reservoir closely related to the seismic concerns is the issue of landslides along the shores of the Great Reservoir, a genuine and documented challenge that has posed real dangers to the communities living along the transformed river, and that illustrates yet another way in which a structure of this magnitude reshapes the landscape and the risks within it. When the reservoir behind the Three Gorges Dam filled, it raised the water level dramatically along hundreds of miles of the river valley, submerging the lower slopes of the steep valley walls and saturating the ground along the new shoreline. This change in the water level and the saturation of the slopes can destabilize the steep hillsides that line much of the reservoir. And the fluctuation of the reservoir level as the dam is operated, rising and falling with the seasons and the demands of flood control and power generation, can further stress and weaken these slopes. The result has been an increased incidence of landslides along the reservoir, as destabilized slopes give way and slide into the water or down onto the settlements and infrastructure along the shore. These landslides pose real dangers to the communities that live along the reservoir, threatening homes, roads, and lives. And in some cases, landslides sliding into the reservoir can generate waves that themselves pose hazards to shoreline communities and river traffic. The management of this landslide risk is an ongoing challenge, requiring monitoring of unstable slopes, engineering works to stabilize them, and in some cases, the relocation of people away from the most dangerous areas. The landslide problem is a genuine and serious consequence of the creation of the Great Reservoir, a real and documented challenge that affects the safety of the communities along the transformed river. It is another example of the legitimate concerns surrounding the dam, the kind of real, tangible issue that deserves attention. Distinct from the sensational and debunked claims of imminent collapse, the landslides along the reservoir remind us that the transformation of the river by the dam has had far-reaching consequences for the landscape and the people who live within it, consequences that extend well beyond the Great Wall of the dam itself, and that must be managed continually over the long life of the structure. The ecological transformation. Beyond the questions of engineering and safety, the Three Gorges Dam has wrought a profound ecological transformation upon the Yangtze River and its basin, and this environmental dimension is a genuine and significant part of the dam's full story, representing costs and consequences that ripple through the natural systems of one of the world's great rivers. The construction of the dam and the creation of its enormous reservoir fundamentally altered the character of a long stretch of the Yangtze, transforming a wild, flowing river into a deep, slow reservoir, and this transformation has had far-reaching effects on the ecology of the river and the life that depends on it. The Yangtze was home to a rich and unique array of aquatic life, including species found nowhere else on Earth, adapted over long ages to the particular conditions of the great river. The damming of the river disrupted the habitats and the migratory patterns of many of these species, blocking their movements, changing the flow and temperature and chemistry of the water, and altering the ecosystem in ways that placed great stress on the river's biodiversity. Some of the Yangtze's unique species have suffered severe declines, and the river's ecological health has been affected in ways that are complex and, in some cases, severe and lasting. The alteration of the river's flow has affected the wetlands and lakes downstream that depend on the river's natural rhythms, and the trapping of sediment and nutrients has consequences for the productivity and health of the lower river and its ecosystems. The ecological transformation wrought by the dam is a genuine and serious cost, one that must be weighed in any full accounting of the structure, representing a profound alteration of one of the world's great river ecosystems and the diverse life it sustained. This environmental dimension is often less discussed than the dramatic scenarios of flood and collapse, but it is a real and significant part of the dam's legacy. A reminder that the taming of the great river came at a cost not only to the people who were displaced, but to the natural world of the river itself, a cost that continues to unfold in the altered ecology of the transformed Yangtze. The vigilance that guards the dam, given the enormous stakes involved, the Three Gorges Dam is the object of intensive vigilance, monitored and maintained with a seriousness commensurate with its importance, and understanding this vigilance is essential to a balanced view of the structure's safety, because it is the primary reason that the sensational scenarios of sudden collapse are so improbable. A structure holding back so much water above so many people is not left to chance. It is watched over continuously by an array of instruments and by the engineers responsible for its operation, who track its condition and behavior in exhaustive detail. The dam is fitted with extensive monitoring systems that measure its structural condition, tracking any movement, stress, deformation, or seepage, and providing continuous data on the state of the great structure. The behavior of the concrete, the pressures within and around the dam, the seepage of water through and beneath it, and countless other parameters are monitored, so that any developing problem could be detected early, long before it could threaten the integrity of the structure. The reservoir level is carefully managed, raised and lowered according to the seasons and the demands of flood control and power generation, and this operation is conducted with attention to the stresses it places on the dam and the surrounding slopes. The dam is also inspected and maintained, its systems tested and its condition assessed, in an ongoing effort to ensure that it continues to function safely. This intensive monitoring and maintenance is the reason that responsible engineers can speak with confidence about the dam's condition, and it is why the claims of imminent, undetected collapse are not credible. A structure watched this closely would show warning signs of any serious problem long before catastrophe, giving ample time for response. The vigilance that guards the dam is a crucial part of its story, a reminder that the safety of the structure rests not only on the strength of its original construction, but on the continuous attention it receives, the watchful eyes and careful hands that tend it day after day. This ongoing guardianship is what stands between the enormous stakes and the improbable catastrophe, and it is a central reason for confidence that the dam is not, despite the rumors, on the brink of failure. Why the fears persist if the sensational claims of imminent collapse have been debunked? And if the dam is intensively monitored and not showing signs of failure, it is worth asking why the fears about the Three Gorges Dam persist so stubbornly, why the anxious speculation continues to circulate despite the reassurances. Because the answer reveals something about human psychology and about the genuine, if remote, gravity of the stakes involved. The persistence of the fears is not simply irrationality, it flows from several understandable sources, even if the specific dramatic claims are unfounded. Part of it is the sheer magnitude of the stakes. When a single structure holds back enough water to threaten hundreds of millions of people if it were to fail, the imagination is naturally drawn to the catastrophe, however unlikely. Because the scale of the potential disaster is so overwhelming. The mind fixates on the worst case not because it is probable, but because it is so terrible, and a risk of catastrophic magnitude, even at low probability, commands a kind of attention that more mundane dangers do not. Part of it, too, is the genuine existence of real challenges, the sediment, the seismic questions, the landslides, the ecological damage, which, though they are long-term and manageable issues rather than harbingers of imminent collapse, nonetheless provide a kernel of real concern around which the more exaggerated fears can crystallize. When people learn that a structure faces genuine engineering challenges, it is easy for that awareness to slide into exaggerated fear, especially when the stakes are so high. And part of it is the nature of information in the modern age, the way that dramatic claims and alarming images can spread rapidly and widely, often outpacing the more measured corrections that follow, so that a debunked rumor can continue to circulate and provoke anxiety long after it has been refuted. The fears about the Three Gorges Dam persist then, not because the dam is about to fail, but because the stakes are so enormous, because real challenges do exist, and because dramatic claims spread easily. Understanding why the fears persist is part of understanding the dam's place in the public imagination, and it underscores the importance of approaching the subject with both seriousness about the genuine issues and skepticism toward the sensational claims, holding to the measured truth between panic and dismissal. The floods that test the dam. It is worth dwelling on the dam's central purpose, flood control, in more detail, because the great floods that periodically sweep down the Yangtze are the ultimate test of the structure, the moments when its most important function is called upon and its performance is judged. And understanding how the dam interacts with these floods illuminates both its value and its limits. The Yangtze Basin is subject to a seasonal pattern of heavy rains, and in certain years those rains are especially intense, swelling the river and its tributaries, and sending great volumes of water surging down toward the populous lowlands. It is in these years of great flooding that the dam is meant to prove its worth, holding back a portion of the floodwaters in its reservoir and releasing them in a more controlled manner, so as to reduce the peak of the flood as it passes downstream. When such floods come, the operation of the dam becomes a delicate and high-stakes exercise. The managers of the dam must balance competing demands, holding back enough water to reduce the downstream flooding, while not allowing the reservoir to rise so high as to endanger the dam itself or to require a sudden large release later. managing the sediment that the floodwaters carry, and coordinating with the many other structures and measures that make up the broader flood control system of the river basin. The dam does not act alone, but is part of a larger system of flood management, and its capacity, while enormous, is not unlimited. A flood large enough can exceed the dam's ability to fully contain it, so that the dam reduces but does not eliminate the downstream flooding in the greatest events. On a number of occasions since its completion, the dam has been called upon to help manage major floods, and its operation has been credited with reducing the severity of flooding downstream, holding back vast quantities of water and lowering the flood peak. Yet there have also been major floods in which serious flooding still occurred downstream despite the dam, illustrating that the dam is a powerful tool but not an absolute guarantee against the river's floods, and that the ancient threat of Yangtze flooding, though greatly reduced, has not been entirely eliminated. The floods that test the dam are thus a reminder both of its genuine value in reducing the danger and of the limits of even the greatest engineering against the immense forces of nature, a nuanced reality that lies between the extremes of viewing the dam as either a perfect shield or a looming catastrophe. The aging of a great structure, one dimension of the Three Gorges Dam that deserves consideration and that bears on its long-term future is the simple fact that the dam, like all structures, will age, and the management of that aging across the vast span of time the dam is meant to endure is one of the profound challenges of its existence. A structure of this magnitude is built to last for a very long time, and its designers engineered it for durability, but no structure lasts forever without care, and the maintenance of the dam's integrity across decades and potentially centuries is an obligation that will pass from generation to generation of engineers and stewards. The concrete of the dam, the machinery of its turbines and gates, the systems that monitor and control it, all will age and require maintenance, repair, and eventual replacement, an unending task of upkeep that must be sustained across the entire life of the structure. This long-term challenge of aging and maintenance is a genuine and important aspect of the dam's story, one that operates on a timescale beyond the immediate, but that is no less real for that. The dam's safety depends not only on the quality of its original construction, which was undertaken to high standards, but on the diligence with which it is maintained across the long years of its existence. And this places a burden of stewardship on those who will tend the dam far into the future, long after its builders are gone. The sediment will continue to accumulate, the slopes will continue to shift, the seismic risks will remain, and the structure itself will continue to age, so that the management of the dam is not a task that is ever completed, but an ongoing responsibility that must be met faithfully across the generations. The aging of the great structure is a reminder that the Three Gorges Dam is not a finished achievement, but a permanent obligation, a commitment that the nation has taken on to maintain and manage the dam for as long as it stands and holds back the river, a commitment measured not in years, but in generations, and one whose faithful fulfillment is essential to the safety of the millions who depend upon it. This dimension of time and aging is often overlooked in the dramatic discussions of the dam, but it is among the most important of all, for it is across the long span of the dam's life that its greatest challenges will unfold and its integrity will be tested. The broader lessons of the Great Dam step back from the specific questions surrounding the Three Gorges Dam, and its story offers broader lessons about the relationship between humanity and the great forces of nature, about the ambitions and the costs of monumental engineering, and about the profound responsibilities that come with reshaping the natural world on such a scale. The dam is, in many ways, a symbol of a certain kind of human ambition, the drive to master nature through engineering, to stand human ingenuity against the great forces of the natural world and bend them to human purposes. In the Three Gorges Dam, that ambition reached one of its highest expressions, taming a mighty and deadly river, generating vast power, and protecting millions from floods, an achievement of undeniable magnitude. But the dam also illustrates the costs and the complexities that attend such ambitions, the way that monumental engineering, for all its benefits, carries consequences that ripple far beyond the original intent. The displacement of more than 1 million people, the submersion of ancient towns and cultural heritage, the profound alteration of a great river's ecology, the challenges of sediment and seismicity and landslides, the enormous concentration of risk in a single structure, all of these are the costs and complexities that accompany the benefits, the shadow side of the great achievement. The Three Gorges Dam teaches that when human beings reshape nature on such a scale, they take on enormous responsibilities and create new vulnerabilities even as they solve old problems. That the taming of a river is never simply a triumph, but always a trade, a complex balance of benefit and cost, of security gained and risk created, of problems solved and problems made. This is a lesson that applies not only to this one dam, but to the entire human project of reshaping the natural world, a project that has brought enormous benefits, but that also demands humility, care, and a clear-eyed reckoning with the consequences and responsibilities involved. The Great Dam stands as a monument both to human capability and to the profound complexity of our relationship with nature, a reminder that our greatest works are never without cost, and that mastery of the natural world brings not only power, but responsibility on a commensurate scale. The dam in a changing climate. A further dimension that bears on the future of the Three Gorges Dam and that adds a layer of complexity to its long-term outlook is the changing climate, which is altering the patterns of rainfall and river flow that the dam was designed to manage, and which poses new questions about how the structure will perform in a future that may differ from the conditions it was built for. The dam was designed on the basis of the historical behavior of the Yangtze, the patterns of flood and flow observed over the long record of the river's history, and its flood control capacity was calibrated to the floods that history suggested it might face. But a warming climate is changing those patterns, potentially intensifying the extremes of both flood and drought. And this introduces uncertainty into the calculations on which the dam's design and operation rest. A warming climate can intensify the water cycle, potentially producing more extreme rainfall events and larger floods in some circumstances, even as it may also contribute to more severe droughts in others. For a structure designed to manage the floods of the past, the prospect of more extreme floods in the future is a genuine concern, raising the question of whether the dam's capacity, enormous as it is, will prove sufficient against the intensified extremes that a changing climate might bring. At the same time, more severe droughts could affect the dam's ability to generate power and could complicate the management of the river. As the flows on which the dam depends become more variable and less predictable, the changing climate thus introduces a new and evolving set of challenges for the Great Dam, challenges that were not fully anticipated when it was designed, and that will require adaptation and careful management as the future unfolds. This is another of the genuine, serious, long-term issues surrounding the dam. Distinct from the sensational rumors, a reminder that the structure exists not in a static world, but in a changing one, and that its performance in the decades and centuries to come will be tested by conditions that may differ significantly from those it was built to face. The dam in a changing climate is a subject of real importance, one that underscores the ongoing nature of the challenges the structure faces and the need for continued vigilance and adaptation across its long life. The weight of responsibility, the story of the Three Gorges Dam, ultimately comes down to a matter of responsibility, of the profound obligation that rests upon those who built and now maintain a structure holding the fate of so many in its keeping. And this dimension of responsibility is perhaps the most important of all in understanding the dam's significance. To build a structure that protects hundreds of millions from floods while simultaneously holding back enough water to threaten those same millions if it failed is to take on a responsibility of almost unimaginable weight, an obligation to maintain the integrity of the structure not for years or decades, but potentially for centuries, across all the challenges and changes that such a span of time will bring. This responsibility is ongoing and unending, for the dam must be maintained and monitored and managed continuously, its challenges addressed as they arise, its integrity preserved against the slow forces of sediment and seismicity in time itself. The engineers and authorities who tend the dam bear the weight of the lives that depend on it, a weight that demands the highest standards of diligence, honesty, and care. And the responsibility extends beyond the technical to the moral and the political, encompassing the obligation to be honest about the dam's condition and its challenges, to address the genuine problems it faces rather than dismissing them, to care for the people affected by it and the environment altered by it, and to manage the structure in the interest of the vast populations whose safety depends upon it. The weight of this responsibility is commensurate with the stakes, which is to say it is enormous, and the integrity with which it is borne is in the end one of the most important factors in the safety of the millions who live in the dam's shadow. The Three Gorges Dam is not only a marvel of engineering, but a test of responsibility, an ongoing obligation that must be met faithfully across the generations, and the meeting of that obligation is what stands, ultimately, between the great benefits the dam provides and the catastrophe that its failure would represent. The symbol and the reality there is a way in which the Three Gorges Dam has become as much a symbol as a structure, an object onto which people project their hopes and their fears, their admiration and their anxieties, and understanding this symbolic dimension helps to explain why the dam occupies such a large place in the imagination far beyond the region it directly affects. To its supporters and to the nation that built it, the dam is a symbol of achievement, of the capacity of a determined people to accomplish something monumental, to master a great and deadly river and turn its power to human benefit. It stands as a source of pride, a demonstration of engineering prowess and national ambition, a landmark that announces the arrival of a nation among the ranks of those capable of the greatest feats of construction. To others, particularly to critics and to those who focus on its costs, the dam has become a symbol of a different kind, of the hubris of grand engineering, of the human and environmental costs that such projects can impose, of the risks of concentrating so much power and so much danger in a single structure. And to the wider world, watching from afar, the dam is often a symbol of the sheer scale of things in the world's most populous nation, an object of fascination and sometimes of anxious speculation, its very size and the number of lives connected to it making it a natural focus for both admiration and alarm. These symbolic dimensions, layered on top of the physical reality of the structure, are part of what makes the Three Gorges Dam so endlessly discussed, so persistently the subject of both celebration and fear. But it is important, in the end, to return from the symbol to the reality, to see the dam not merely as a screen for projected hopes and fears, but as what it actually is, an enormous, complex, genuinely beneficial, and genuinely challenging piece of infrastructure, sound and well-maintained, providing real protection and real power to a vast population, while carrying real long-term challenges and a remote but grave risk. The reality is more nuanced than either the celebratory symbol or the fearful one, and it is in that nuanced reality, held steadily between admiration and alarm, that the truest understanding of the great dam is to be found. Living in the shadow of the dam. For the 400 million people who live downstream of the Three Gorges Dam, in the great cities and the fertile plains of the lower Yangtze, the dam is a presence that shapes their lives in ways both seen and unseen, a structure whose existence provides them protection even as it carries, in its shadow, a remote but grave risk, and it is worth considering what it means to live in that shadow. For most of these people, most of the time, the dam is a benefit and a reassurance, a shield against the floods that once devastated the region, a source of the power that lights their homes and drives their economy, a part of the infrastructure of modern life that they may rarely think about at all. They live their lives in the security that the dam helps to provide, largely unaware of the great structure far upstream that holds back the river's floods on their behalf. Yet the dam also means that their fate is bound, in a way, to the integrity of a single structure, that the security they enjoy rests upon the continued soundness of the great wall of concrete far upstream. This is not a cause for daily fear, for the dam is sound and well-maintained, and the catastrophic scenario is remote, but it is a reality of their existence nonetheless, a dependence on a piece of infrastructure whose importance to their safety is difficult to overstate. In this, the people of the lower Yangtze are an extreme example of a condition that is in fact widely shared across the modern world. For vast numbers of people everywhere live downstream of dams, dependent on the integrity of structures that hold back water above their homes, trusting, usually without thinking about it, in the soundness of engineering they will never see. The Three Gorges Dam, holding back so much above so many, is the largest and most dramatic instance of this widespread reality. But the reality itself is common, a feature of a world in which human beings have reshaped the flow of rivers on an enormous scale, and in doing so, have created both protection and dependence. To live in the shadow of the dam is to enjoy its benefits while resting, knowingly or not, upon its integrity, and for 400 million people along the lower Yangtze. That is the condition of their lives, a condition of security and dependence intertwined, shaped by the great structure that stands, for now and for the foreseeable future, sound and strong against the mighty river it was built to tame. It is a condition that calls not for fear, but for awareness, not for panic, but for the steady and sober recognition that the safety of so many rests upon the faithful stewardship of the great dam, and that this stewardship, carried out diligently across the generations, is what allows the 400 million to live their lives in security beneath the river the dam holds back. In that quiet dependence, largely unnoticed and rarely considered,